I wonder what your perspective is on.
Well, I think it's a very
issues.
difficult issue. It's a very sensitive issue. I used to teach American history. I understand about the First Amendment and the preciousness of that. On the other hand, when you become a commissioner of the FCC, you take an oath to enforce the law of the land, and we have statutes against indecency at those times when children are apt to be watching. So it's incredibly, incredibly difficult, but I think a far better way to approach this is rather than trying to get into all these adjudications, and part of the reason we got where we are is not just that industry pushed the boundaries, but that the FCC didn't do its basic job, so things kind of got out of hand, I think, over the course of time. But if we went back to that system I was talking about earlier in the pre-major media consolidation era, and you had that system of checks and balances. So the network doesn't control and own the programming and tell the stations it's going to run it, but those who create the program, and wouldn't it be nice if we had some independent producers who were creating program instead of just the major studios? They're about gone in the United States of America. There's no independent industry of creating programming to speak of. So if we could get back and have some decent rules on media consolidation, I think we'd really make some progress here. You would enable community stations to have more influence in trying to talk to the people who live in a particular community about what kind of programming they want. The stations could deal with the networks, the networks deal with the studio, but that's not where we are right now. Okay. But can we go back to that other question about what we would ask the folks here to do? Because
absolutely,
that's really why I'm here. I'm a strong believer in the old biblical admonition: if the sound of the trumpet be uncertain, then who shall respond to the call to battle? I want to blow a loud trumpet, and I am that worried about. Ultimately, this is a grassroots effort. Whether we bring democracy to our media and reinvigorate public interest in our media, not up to regulators in Washington or just legislators, a grassroots movement. Now everybody's going to say, well, this is the 21st century, we're all in control and under the control of big power. Citizen action doesn't count. Citizen action has checked new rules to loosen our old ownership rules for the past several years. In 2003, when Michael Powell rammed his rules through the commission, 3 million Americans went on record against what he was trying to do. When I went to the FCC in 2001, I didn't think 3 million people knew there was a place called the Federal Communications Commission. They found out, and again, in spite of the fact that big media did a horrible job, with a few exceptions, in informing them that this was even teed up. So it's already worked. Citizen action can work. The good news is we checked the rules. The bad news is we're back to square one, and next week they may try again. But the decisions that will be made in the next month, and even more importantly, the decisions that will be made by our country over the next year are going to determine which road we go down. There was a new poll that came out the other day, says 70% of Americans see media consolidation as an issue. Over 40% as a really serious issue, with almost equal representation of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. And by a margin of 57 to 30%, the respondents to this poll said that a newspaper should not be allowed to own a broadcast station in the same market, and there should be, 57%, there should be legislation to prohibit that. So I think that's optimistic. That kind of gives me hope. So what can you do? I think it depends on your talents, but you hold conferences like this. You write about it. You speak about it. If you're a poet, you write a poem about it. If you're a singer, you sing about it. If you're a blogger, you blog about it. If you want to march, fine, I'll come and join the march, and we'll all march. But it has to be grassroots. It has to be today. Contact every member of that Federal Communications Commission. Tell them what you think. Write to your elected representatives. Write to the White House. Email the White House. I think when you stop and think about it, I don't find the writings of George Orwell to be particularly depressing, or he always had an element of hope in what he was doing, whether he was reporting on the Spanish Civil War veterans or homeless Englishmen or what have you, and he was motivated by the belief that people can get past, if they have some leaders that can help them get past the conventional wisdoms, and move into a new and better age. And I think I am optimistic about this. I know it's daunting. I know it's uphill. I know the chances may be against us, but I think there's a spirit abroad in the land now that opens an opportunity to do something in media democracy. And I think if we don't take advantage of it, we're going to end up with a media system, new media as well as old media, that is overly consolidated, insufficiently representing the United States of America, and destructive of the democratic dialogue of the future of our country depends.
Thank you, Doc. Now, I do want to leave some time for a question, but I know that Charlene had some points that she made at the end of her opening comments about what could be done moving forward in the future. And if you and our other colleagues want to have a final word on that before we go to opening up for questions, I'll be happy to entertain that. So,
well, I just want to say here to Michael's comments, because often I hear that in audiences, the public gets up and says, well, why don't you journalists do X, and why don't you do Y, and why did you do that, and why don't you do that? But the audience never seems to look at itself and say, well, why don't I? And I think I'd just like to affirm what you just said and sign on to that, you know, what was that movie, Network? I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Well, you know, it's time some of you got as mad as hell and did whatever you did not to take it anymore if you find what you see or hear offensive. I was sitting in the living room of a friend of mine the other day when a very weird interview with a strange, well, I won't go into what the story was, but it had to do with reaching down, getting a piece of toilet paper off the shoes and whatever. I mean, I live in Africa, so I came in and I said, what are we talking about? Because the next story was Ellen DeGeneres crying about her dog. And I'm saying, but wait a minute, I've just come from Africa where there's some serious issues. Is this what America's come to? But my friend was so annoyed, she picked up the phone and she called the network and registered a complaint about this ongoing thing about the toilet paper, you know, whatever. You all know what that story was, I don't know. But I do think that the public has a responsibility to weigh in. And I also like to sign on to what Alexandra was talking about in terms of the language. All of my academic friends, I love academics who say, I want to make 3 points, and then they make 3 points. I've never been able to do that. So I love academics for that. But I really am troubled by the perversion of language, because I was in a conference in Cape Town recently. I was moderating the panel, and I was, what do you call it? I was filibustering because I had no idea what they were talking about. So I would say, well, now what do you think about that? And then I'd say, well, now where do we go from here? Because I didn't have any idea. And so you people in academia who are training the next generation of journalists have got to get them to stop saying done instead of finished, none are, and things like that. Every day I turn on the television and listen to channel and this channel, and the language is just being perverted in a way, and I'm saying, where are they getting this from? And I think it's kids who are coming into universities where they have specializations, they learn how to do lights, they learn how to do sound, they learn all this technical stuff, but they don't learn the basics.
Nick, where are you? Present company excluded, of course. Columbia, USC, and Berkeley are all excluded from this. But it is a universal challenge. I mean, we have a challenge now where if we're teaching the next generation, the kids who are going to be graduating in 2012, 2013, and working until 2040 or 50, what's the balance between ethics, the ability to write, the fact that, in fact, there is media conversion, and so when now people are being sent out on the beat, in many instances, they take a camera, they take a pen, they take I almost said typewriter, a computer, sound equipment. So all of these challenges, I think, are ones that all of us will face. And I have to say, one of the things that has surprised me the most as the new dean of a journalism school